Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. I'm so glad you're here and listening into the podcast and that you take time to listen in. And because you've been such faithful listeners, we've been ranked in the top 5% of all podcasts globally, according to Listen Notes. So thank you for listening. And we ask for your continued support. It really does mean something if you follow, rate, subscribe wherever you're listening or watching the podcast or listening to the podcast, and go ahead and give us a review. That helps us keep it going. All right. So now today I'm talking with Katya Karlova. Now let me tell you a little bit about Katya. She's a transformational leader, content creator, speaker whose journey from a corporate powerhouse to a creative visionary has inspired thousands. Once an award winning vice president of talent and HR for a billion-dollar health and wellness company, Katya now channels her passion into empowering others through storytelling, advocacy, and personal invention. And we're going to hear so much more about her journey. And her new book, Invisible Pain, Unstoppable Power, is a testament to the strength that lies beneath adversity, and it inspires readers to reclaim their voices and stand in their truth. Welcome, Katya Karlova.
Thank you so much, Dr. Robin. Thank you for having me, and congratulations on your ranking of the podcast. That is absolutely an incredible achievement.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm so glad you're here. You have such an inspiring story to me, and you heard me say a little bit about it from just your introduction. But just tell us a little bit first about who you are, then we'll get into what you do. But anything you want to say about who you are?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I do have, I think, a unique story. I was born in Eastern Europe, grew up here in the United States. I did everything you're supposed to do, went to college, went to graduate school in London, started my career, started working, always worked in talent and HR. And then COVID became a time of reflection for me when I really confronted a lot of the issues that I'd been stuffing down. That period of isolation really gave me the time to confront, I think this hole I had inside myself, that I had been filling with work. I was very much a workaholic. And so that's really where my journey started. It was during COVID. And as I started to kind of dig deeper, I realized that I had a lot of body confidence issues. I'd had them my whole life. I think anybody growing up in the early 2000s, now it's really coming up about how ludicrous what we were told was, with the celebrities we were shown and that were called fat or other words. And there was no body positivity at the time. And I think that really, that sort of body confidence stuff really, oh, it was really hard for me to get through. And then I started modeling as a way to combat that, to really confront it head on. And for me, that was transformational. And I started sharing my journey on social media and trying to share more about body positivity and learning to love your curves and the body that you're in, and realizing that none of us are perfect. There's no such thing as perfect. Um, and then at the height of my success, I got diagnosed with endometriosis and battled that through 4 surgeries and multiple procedures and ER visits. Um, and then just last year, I left the corporate world officially to focus on writing my book. And 8 months later, it I was finally done, and it came out in October. And it's a book that is about, really how to redefine your life after going through trauma or adversity. And that could be anything, not just a health issue, but it could be, job loss, or death in the family, any kind of trauma. How do you really recognize that your life, you're living in the now, and the decisions you make now are the ones that define your future. So you choose your future, and really getting that message across, because I see people struggling. It's a difficult time in the world in general, and I think I wanted to try and support, mainly women that are going through a lot of challenges within healthcare, but if it inspires others, and I know a lot of men have read it as well. It just officially became an Amazon bestseller, so that is huge. I couldn't imagine that happening, but I'm glad that people are getting something out of it, and it has a
Congratulations
future.
on that. Yeah, I didn't want to miss that.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So that's it. That's my story in a nutshell,
Okay, that's a fascinating story, and you gave us the whole overview. So now I'm going to go back and unpack it for us because there's a lot in there that you are probably, it's a part of your story. So I want to dig a little deeper. Okay, all right. So now
Absolutely.
let's go way back. All right, you said you were born in Eastern Europe.
I
Uh,
was in the Republic of Moldova.
okay, so now when you were a little, were you still there when you were a little girl?
I was. We moved when I was 7.
When you were 7. Anywhere around there, did you ever have any dreams of doing any of the things that you're doing now, whether it was from working in corporate or now even with the book? Did you have any of those thoughts back then?
Good God, no. I never really knew. I think when growing up, I wanted to work for like the FBI, or, some kind of governmental job. I was really active in politics, but um, I never imagined working in talent or HR, but it's one of those things that you fall into, and you just kind of it's just such a natural it became such a natural fit, assessing potential and talent in others. And then I was doing a lot of leadership coaching at the time as well, so I think it just was a natural fit. Not something I planned on, but I fell into it after graduate school, and that's the only thing I ever did career wise, and I learned
Okay.
a lot from it.
Okay, that's interesting. All right, so now let's go. You mentioned grad school. All right, so let's go back to before grad school. What did you major in college?
Actually, I majored in global studies, with a minor in Russian studies at UCLA, and I wrote my graduate work and my research work in undergrad and grad school was actually about corruption and human trafficking and human rights.
Okay. All right. So now you said you went to grad school, and grad school is when you started thinking about HR. So how did that happen? How did you think about HR as a fit for you? Because you said it seemed like a net flow.
It's interesting. I remember I went to graduate school at University College London. They have the best institute for Slavonic and Eastern European studies, and I was studying within that field. And I graduated, and the path was really graduate, or most people went on to do their PhD, but I was burnt out. I had been working to get to, you know, the best college and the best grad school probably since I was in middle school. I was like, I just need a break. And I had an opportunity to use my Russian language skills at a job that was going to be doing recruiting. And so I was able to kind of use my Russian and language skills, and I could speak a little bit of Romanian at the time, and use that actually within recruiting for the oil and gas industry, which was really, big. There was a big um, push at that time. There were a lot of different projects. I don't know if a pulse on it now, but that's how I fell into it. There was a job, and I was a student that needed a job, and
Hmm.
I fell into it, and then I realized I loved it. And usually you either stay in it forever, or you leave within 6 months and you never do it again. So talent recruiting seemed to be a fit.
Yeah, because it used something you were already good at. That was the entry point. You were good at the languages, so then that opened up the door. So it makes sense. All right, so now how long were you in HR?
Prob 15 years total.
15 years.
15 years.
Wow, 15 years. And you said early on in the, or maybe I read it in your introduction, you came to this point where you made this change. Let's talk about that. Let's call it your crossroads moment, okay?
Yeah.
So let's talk about this crossroads moment. What was going on? What did it look like at that time?
My crossroads moment started during COVID. That's when I started to really reflect and think about, um, is this make, it was the first time I had the chance to the time to ask the question, am I happy? Am I fulfilled? Is this what I want to be doing? Is this a path I want to continue going down? Um, and the answer was no, because I think that's when a lot of workers realized that the way that the workforce was being treated um, wasn't necessarily very good. And a lot of changes have happened since COVID with allowing remote work and allowing more flexibility. But before then, I mean, it was you have to be on site 5 days a week and you have to be in the office and you have to be there. And that doesn't leave a lot of time to live. And that's sort of the thing of, I started to think about you know, countries in Europe where they work to live and we live to work. And and for me, I started really thinking if that was my crossroads moment. And then down the line um when I was diagnosed with endo, that was the real deciding factor. That was the real decision where I had to make a choice about what my future was going to look like. And um, I had to pick my health. I had to pick a work-life balance and a path that would give me and my body the ability to be healthy. And
Yes.
the corporate grind was not going to allow that.
Yes. How long was it from the time, because you said that was your reflection started during the pandemic.
Mhm.
How long from that time to the diagnosis?
So that's a great question. So 2020 through 2022 was sort of when I started thinking about it. And then my diagnosis was in late 2022, and my surgeries were all 2023. So it's kind of like it all happened within that same timeline. It started with the pandemic, and then towards, we were sort of still working remote through 2022. And then at the end of 22, I got my diagnosis. And that's when all of 2023 was surgery after surgery after surgery. And after the end of it, I realized, actually, a doctor tell me that, I had a doctor tell me that the way that I was burning myself out wasn't sustainable.
Oh, so that was a big wake up call moment.
Oh, yes. I still remember it now. Um, I was trying to find a primary care doctor. I went to see her. I was about 40 pounds. I had lost about 40 pounds just because I was so nauseous. I couldn't hold food down. I was severely anemic, so I would get dizzy anytime I would stand up. And so I wasn't holding food down. I clearly had gastric issues. I was, you know, malnourished. And through all this, I was trying to show up at work. I didn't take my time off for any of my invasive surgeries. I didn't take the FMLA leave. I didn't take the required. I took like maybe 3 days off per surgery. Insane.
Oh,
These are
oh,
surgeries that require 4 week, 6 week recovery.
yeah.
And I pushed myself because that's what we're conditioned to do.
Where do you think that drive came from? I know societally we are kind of in that drive mode. Do you know of any place personally for you where that drive to keep working, or what would happen if you didn't show up in the way you thought you had to show up? Were there expectations? What do you think? What would be your guess about where that came from, if any?
I think it's because I actually worked in HR, so I knew the way that leaders would candidly talk about employees. And the truth was that leaders didn't really want employees with, intermittent health issues that would have them out of the office. And I knew that that was the reality. So I wanted to avoid that as much as possible. But in the end, I realized that, you know, I should be working somewhere that is supporting me through something like this and not, I went into work I went into work with stitches in
Mm,
after a partial hysterectomy.
um, yeah,
So that will tell you the level of, you know, pressure I placed on myself and was put on me.
yeah,
Um, and I think a lot of people uh, can empathize with that because I know I'm not the only one that faces that pressure at
you're
work.
You're right, and then the expectations of the job versus, on the other hand, the doctor saying, "This is not good for you." That's putting it mildly. So how are you feeling now? How's your health today?
Good, much better. I mean, I'm very lucky. I've gotten to the point where I've had my, excision surgery and I and now figured out a routine and I have, a team, a pain management doctor, a primary care physician, like it's a whole team to manage it. But I think, living with a chronic illness is it's no joke. It really is something that you have to factor into your life. And stress is the silent killer. If you let let stress rule your life, it will absolutely destroy your health. And
Yes.
that's that's what you know, I thought was normal.
Yes, and we hear that term, but I think we take it for granted that stress is a silent killer, and it is true, and in your case, you lived through it. So now, and I'm glad you're feeling better and you're doing what uh is right for you these days. All right, so now let's go back just a little bit and then we'll come back to today. All right, so after you were going back, not fully recovered after the surgeries and all that, going back to work, when did you, or what were the circumstances around the time, the moment, the day, the period where you said, I'm going to actually leave this? And what were you thinking when you left it? Did you have a plan?
Yeah, I mean, I think my plan was really to try to make a difference. I think I learned so much about endo that I was like, there needs to be some kind of advocacy. And on social media, I had built a platform. I had been working part-time as a creator, and I had built a platform to get this message out. And the plan was I want to write a book about this because one doesn't exist. There's no book out there by an endo warrior to tell women how do you even begin to go through this when it's an illness that is both incredibly common, incredibly painful, and yet doctors know very little about it. There's no cure, antiquated treatments, if any, and usually doctors know very little about treating it. And that's if you're in a cosmopolitan area like Los Angeles, where I live. I still, I mean, I had had endo probably for the entirety of my life. And so it took me 22 years to get a diagnosis. And
Oh,
10 years is common, a decade of bouncing around the healthcare system, before you get the right diagnosis. So I had just made the decision. It really, I think for me, after I had gone through all of it, and when my doctor was like, you have to take FMLA leave immediately, at the end of that leave, I was changed. I was a different person. I had really used that time to think, and my entire perspective on life was changed. I couldn't go back to the way things were and pretend
Yeah.
like it was normal. So that was the moment for me is when my FMLA ended, I was like, I can't go back to um, being glued to my phone 24/7, and I, my body won't, I had just gotten myself healthy. I was like, I will undo all of that work if I put myself in that situation.
Yeah.
And my doctor even said the same thing.
Yeah. And good for you for doing that because I can imagine even with that, it's not easy, but you made your mind up to do it. And I want to point out something the way it happened wasn't the best way for you to get some time, both from the pandemic and then from the leave, to finally have some time and space to just reflect and think about who you are and what you want. So for people who are listening, I want to say um, they don't have to wait until something major like this happens. But if they can find some time to get quiet and think and reflect about who they are and what's important to them. Okay, all right. So now we moved up to the point where you took that courageous step and you said, I'm going to do this. And good for you for saying, this is something that I went through and I want to help others. And now look at you. You're really making a difference, doing what you set out to do. And you're making a difference in the lives of others, even being here and having that conversation. So thank you for having the courage to do that and stepping out there.
You know, to me, it was like, I was just obvious. Like, I think I don't know. It's like one of those moments where you just feel such clarity. And I just knew that, like, I could see, um, like, my future flashed before me, and I was like, if I go back to that same grind, that same hustle, I am going to run my health into the ground. And and I think as women, we typically uh end up taking on more. We always want to take on more. We're societally conditioned to do it. We just, unconsciously end up taking on, more that's on our plate. And, I've interviewed thousands of leaders in my career, thousands, but women are always the ones who, you know, one way or another, they either struggle with their confidence a little bit. Like for example, and this is, an anecdote, but it's real. A woman will see a job description and look at it and say, I can't apply. I don't fit all the criteria. And a man will look at that job description and think, why not? I'll just apply. And so it's one of these things where I've interviewed incredible male and female leaders, but it's, women that are more prone to um, overwhelming themselves and taking on too much and getting to that point of burnout,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned women. So let's talk to the woman who's listening now, who is high achieving, ambitious, responsible, doing all the things, and having on the outside what looks like success. Everything looks good, but on the inside lately it's not feeling good to them anymore. And they're coming to this point where they're at a career crossroads. It may be to the point intensity of yours or not, but somehow they're in this crossroads and they're listening to us now. What's something you can share from your either personal or professional experience that just might encourage them a bit right now in this moment?
I think the biggest piece of advice that I would give is, um, listen to your gut. And really what that is it's like, it's almost like an area, kind of like where your solar plexus are. It's like this area right here. And if you, take the time to uh maybe meditate or go out in nature somewhere quiet, just let your listen to your body, feel where you're holding that tension, because you're holding it somewhere. and and if you, ask yourself the questions, and maybe what you need to do is not quit your job and do something else. Maybe it's delegating away a lot of responsibilities. Maybe it's setting firmer boundaries at work. It could be something like that. It could be something, a minor change that you need to make. Or, for example, you have to speak to your partner about, doing their fair share around the house, something like that. But if you just go somewhere and sit and just in quiet, and I would recommend somewhere in nature, and you just you just sit and feel your body and try to feel where you hold your tension. And then if you reflect upon that, you will know what it is that's stressing you out. It will come to you naturally, because it's like you are asking your subconscious and trying to connect to it. And really, and that subconscious will tell you, you know, it's like a body check-in, kind of. Um, and I know I do that sometimes now. Like, I meditate when I know I'm feeling anxious or overwhelmed, to kind of take that moment to breathe, meditate, find out where I'm holding that stress, and then ask my body why. and and you really will get an answer, honestly. um, and it could be the solution is simple, or it could be that you need to make a drastic change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. And all right, so now that you've done this and you set out to, and you're doing what you set out to do, changed your work, getting your message out through your book and through your content, would you say now you have a sense of meaning and purpose that you were looking for before? Do you feel like you have that now?
Absolutely. Without a question, I mean, without a doubt. um, I feel, I think the biggest thing is, I don't feel that sense of, constant, constant pressure, constant, it's like this kind of almost like a weight on my chest all the time. Um, but yeah, I feel in general, um, more, uh, more free, I guess is the best way to put it. And that was a feeling I wasn't used to.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it doesn't mean it's going to be easy. I mean, making big changes doesn't mean they're easy to make, but sometimes you have to ask yourself, like for me, it was really life or death. It was like, you either will run yourself and your health into the ground, um, or you make a decision now to prioritize your health. And I think for a lot of women, um, they are starting to suffer, either health challenges because of the stressors that they deal with on a daily basis.
Well, I'm so grateful to have you here today to help us think through and pay attention to those signs in our body and that stress when it's getting to a point where it might be overwhelming or not even letting it get to that point. So I really appreciate you for coming and sharing your story with us and also letting us know about your book, Invisible Pain, Unstoppable Power. All right, so if people want to be in touch with you, where can they follow you?
They can follow me on Instagram, at Katya.b.karlova. My website is katyabkarlova.com. I'm also on Twitter. It's Katya underscore B underscore Karlova. Anywhere, that's kind of the best way to keep in touch. I would recommend, I think if you are, on this topic, if you are wondering if maybe it's time to make a change. Um, I think perhaps the book will be helpful because it's not a traditional book. It has a lot of exercises in it that are neuro linguistic programming exercises. So I collaborated with a doctor to design them to change the way you think about certain things. And, perhaps the book or the journal might help you navigate, your own subconscious to making the right decision for you. But all I know is I think women right now in this day and age are sort of realizing that, there is an enormous amount of pressure on us, where, it's it's like you can't do it right, you can't do it wrong. It's why that Barbie monologue became so, it struck a chord, because that's how women are feeling, like they
You
just.
s- when you said that, sorry to interrupt you, but when you said that, the moment you said it, you can't do it right, you can't do it wrong. That's the image that came into my mind, that monologue from the movie Barbie
Yeah.
before you even said it. So it was like right there, that image was right in front of my mind. So you're
it
hitting the nail right on the head.
I mean, it's exactly, I think, where what women are realizing is they can't, you know, they just, there's just no way. You're either too much this, too much that, too much that. And I think that that's why I'm such an advocate for women's health, because um I mean, and you also, I founded a nonprofit earlier this year as well, Endo Visible, and it's really focused on raising awareness of endo. But through it, I learned that, women's pain is just not treated the same as a man's pain. And that is just such a sad reality, because I really went through it. So I think women right now are in this place where I almost think we're finally kind of ready to take on a new identity of recognizing how powerful we really are, and really changing the narrative for ourselves, versus someone else telling us what the narrative is.
I mean, that, Katya, you can't leave it on any better note than that. Changing the narrative for ourselves. That's the closing message for today. And I appreciate you, Katya, for being here today and sharing your very deeply personal story and powerful story that I know is going to help so many women through your sharing on social media and your book in all the ways. So thank you for being here. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Robin. I really appreciate it.
And everyone, I'd love to hear your response to this episode. You can follow me on socials or just follow me, especially on LinkedIn, where I spend most of my time. On all of them, you can find me at Robin L. Owens, PhD, at Robin L. Owens, PhD. And until next time, this is Dr. Robin.